Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. The first hour is general discussion about things that we think, everything around media production and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about SuperSources and specifically what we're thinking about related to Office Hours. We'll brainstorm a little bit about that as we move into the Office Hours 2.0 next week. Tomorrow, we'll talk about hosting, some of the ideas around hosting and so on and so forth. We're going to talk about the second hour and more Office Hours 2.0 on Friday. And then, of course, Saturday's the long day. We got education. We don't stream that. And then at noon, in its own event, we will have, we're going to be going back to the Belfast method, but at Todd Reynolds' house. So we'll be doing that on Saturday. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. Courtney?
All right. First up this morning is from Ray Franklin in Mount Dora, Florida. He asks, with multiple computers on most desktops, how often do you completely restart or reboot your computers?
Go ahead, Charles.
Mostly on big renders, my render machine, I will tend to restart before I set off the render. Some machines I find that they just tend to go a little quicker. I found from experience. So.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I'm with Charles on that. If I'm in After Effects and things start getting a little pokey, and even if I do empty the cache, sometimes it just gets a little wonky, so it's necessary to restart it. But in general, I don't restart them unless they need it or if there's a technical problem.
John?
Copy what Mitchell just said. I've got an iMac Pro. I reboot it about once a month if there's an issue. But my PC and my Raspberry Pis, I'm interested to hear what Doug Ferguson has to say, how often he has to reboot his PCs.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, just like the others have said before, any critical project, it's kind of good housekeeping, I find, just to restart. But other machines, I just literally leave on all the time.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I leave mine running almost all the time. Every now and then I will notice something that doesn't work correctly and I will reboot, and it's usually because Windows has downloaded parts of an update and hasn't done a full restart yet. And then I'll restart it, and then it'll take a half an hour to restart because of all the things it's installed in the meantime.
Go ahead, Chris.
Every night. I turn off every computer every night unless I'm uploading giant files for you.
The thing is that I have gotten into the habit of restarting my computers a lot more than I used to. I probably restart them once a week. I mean, most of the computers that I'm really working with, there's definitely computers I have that stay on all the time, but I do find that they work a little bit better, when you just refresh them, every once in a while, and let them reset when they start back up, at least on a Mac. They're kind of resetting stuff. There's a lot of memory that gets let go. There's, drive, cache space, so on and so forth. Especially if I've been rendering. So rendering out of Motion, rendering out of Resolve, rendering out of Cinema 4D. The rendering seems to put more pressure on the system over a long period of time, and I find that the whole thing is a little snappier after I've restarted. So, and anytime I go into a production, like, okay, I'm going to work on this for the next 3 or 4 hours, I almost always restart my machine just to kind of clear it all out and get it ready to go. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Next question.
Another one coming in from Ray Franklin in Mount Dora, Florida. Are others spending less time on after hours because of some people dominating the conversations? A mission statement or for after hours might be helpful.
Go ahead, Sky.
I think this virtual pub that we have is going to sort itself out. I think the novelty of a place of gathering is just like any physical space. We're learning each other's characteristics, and as an abuser of that, I've tried to be very circumspect about how much time that I speak, and Alex has continued to guide me in helping to be succinct. So I think a mission statement would be dangerous, personally.
Yeah, go ahead, Kenneth.
Yeah, I agree that a mission statement is probably counterproductive. It's a continuation of the media production and virtual production conversations that we have here. And the camaraderie grows as some people come and some people go, and it never hurts to invite your acquaintances to drop by sometime. More the merrier.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
The question is based on acknowledging that there is a problem. I have only been here for about a month, but I have never noticed that being an issue, particularly because of the way Alex has crafted the procedure and the way panelists work. We all have our chances, so It doesn't seem to be an issue.
I think this is the after hours, you know, with
Oh.
that's a little less structured. And, you know, I think that one of the things that, I think that I go up a lot of times and there's no one talking at all. so no one's dominated. What's funny though is if someone starts to talk, then there's a conversation that springs out of it. You know, and so I think that what I find fascinating is that there's 20, 30, 40 people in there and there's nothing really going on. And then suddenly there's a conversation that springs out of it that people are just kind of listening for that. It doesn't have to be there. I think there's definitely times when we have a handful of people talking. And I think that one of the things that we have to get better at in general is, you know, that kind of process of when all of us being conscious to when someone raises their digital hand that they'd like to say something and finding a place. I think as we all are, and either we stop what we're doing so that we can, you know, find a place at what we're talking about to stop talking and throw it to someone, but also for us to help move that conversation. So someone else is talking and not really conscious to that. We just need to interrupt them and say, hey, let's jump up and see what Sky's raised its hand about and try to do the best we can there. I think that the other thing that's sometimes challenging in an unstructured conversation is, you know, there's two things. One is that when I listen, you know, I try to hope that we keep it to at least a geeky mentality. And I'm not always that way either, but a kind of lean towards media, somewhat geeky. And then sometimes, you know, we get into some conversations that are, you know, we're just loose because we're all hanging out with each other all the time, but we want to kind of be conscious that there's people that are all listening to it. So I think we want to be conscious of that. But I think that having a little bit of, you know, just kind of geeky conversation. This is really kind of the largest water cooler in the world. And so we want to kind of keep it, you know, appropriate to the kind of subject matter most people are there to listen to. I think that, you know, and I think that we're going to work more with hosts to, you know, whoever we define as a host, because we generally have someone defined as a host all the time of, you know, being really conscious to that their job, you know, when they can, I mean, it's not going to be perfect. I mean, we're all volunteer staff, but when they can, you know, just to kind of keep that conversation moving, keep it moving past someone who might be taking up a lot of time if there's other people that are interested. I don't think it's a problem if people are taking up a lot of time if no one else is talking. And I think that most people don't know, like a lot of it is like the life that we live in the real world. A lot of this is unspoken rules and processes. There's not a big thing there. So a lot of people don't know, oh, just raise your digital hand and we'll get to you relatively soon. So those are things that, and we just need to be more conscious as a group to do that. So I think that and again, no one's ever done it before. so we're figuring it out. And I am a little hesitant. You'll find that I am very, like I set up a couple hard rules, but I'm very hesitant to set up lots of rules. You know, like I think I want to watch things kind of evolve, and you know, there are some hard and fast rules, but there's a temptation to make to try to fix everything with rules, and that often makes it worse. So I think making lots of rules can often make things worse rather than better, just because, you know, yeah. So yeah, lean geek, as Chris said. Hey Chris, I'm gonna step away just for a minute or two. I got a little fire to put out. I'm gonna have you just keep running with this for a couple minutes.
All right. For the record, so you know, I can't select people in the
Okay, great. I'll fill that up. I'll be back by the time you get.
Okay, bye.
Okay, I'll give you that access. Just stand by. You'll see it appear soon.
How fun. All right, so let's see. And I think the last thing about Ray's comment is, are people spending less time? So I would concur. I think there is a little bit of dip in conversation, but always jump in and start one. Oh, my thing just went. All right, look at that. I just got new controls. Thank you, Alex. Let's go to the next question.
Somebody. Okay. From Doug Ferguson here on the panel and from Indianapolis says, I used to watch YouTube TV via NDI screen capture. Something has changed. Now everything but video will display. Any thoughts on what changed?
Rupert?
So I think this is a good old-fashioned DRM issue. I encountered somebody having a problem actually playing something out from the Google Play Store and Zoom not screen sharing it. It's a very similar issue. On the off chance, I would try a different browser, but if you're up against DRM, then you may have to get more creative with a workaround.
I think you might be right. I know that, Doug, when I open up the Apple TV app on my computer, if I have OBS on, which has the ability to share a screen, I can play a video on the Apple TV app. I can hear the video, but I can't see the video. I think it's
It's interesting because I can play out YouTube videos, and videos play just fine.
Yeah.
But when it's YouTube TV,
right.
if I'm monitoring like the studio monitor, I cannot see the video part of it. I have tried many different browsers. I thought it was an NDI 5 versus 4 thing. That is not the case. Somehow YouTube TV, I think, has magically figured it out not to be able to share the screen.
Well, it probably has to do with the fact that providers have said, well, we'll let you do this, but you need to somehow keep people from having the ability to record it. So that's what it's doing. Next question.
Don't hit done, whoever's doing that.
I did it, but I don't understand.
Sorry, I'll take it.
Okay.
Vincent Gerald from Louisiana says, after a major project, do you hold a post-event meeting to discuss lessons learned and how things could have been done better with your staff crew to document events for future reference and training scenarios?
Sky?
I've adopted Alex's phrase, room for improvement. And so consequently, I just came off of a project. And so, Vincent, thank you for reminding me that that needs to happen. Because while there were many successes, there were many challenges too. And that's where, Mickey, I get to play my one of my 3 quotes for the day. My dad's statement is, know who your boss is and what they expect of you. And in a large corporate environment, it was very difficult to find out who the final approval person was. So we would have to go just to the next up the food chain person. So how you can get better, you can always get better. Yeah, absolutely write it down. Room for improvement.
Craig? You're muted.
There we go. So just a bit of context. I run a ProServe company. We do big data center migrations. Typically, there's anywhere from a dozen to 24 different events that have 50, 60 people, many of which haven't worked together before. And the key, and so we do dry runs before and then lessons learned after. And what we found is the real key to the lessons learned is having enough content before you go into a lessons learned meeting. Because if you just went into a cold, people are going to just randomly think of things and it's going to be hard. But if I think Alex actually said at one time, he keeps a notepad all the time. And so in the dry run before the event, we'll go through and say, look, it's really important. We want to optimize this or pay attention to this and make sure that people have these are pieces of paper or better yet, an internal shared tool to keep track of things as they observe it. Because a lot of times those things just get missed and they don't remember it Monday morning. And so having all of that ahead of time, so you go into the meeting and then people in that meeting can validate, and then you can decide, all right, which bucket to follow up does this go into? But the key really is making sure that you capture the observations at the time when people notice it, because a lot of times they just forget.
Rupert?
Yeah, it can be easy for these meetings or these processes to take on a negative connotation. You know, what went wrong, what could we do better? But it is important to celebrate the success stories as well. Although, you know, even inevitably, there's probably ways you can improve those. But, you know, I've heard these things called post-mortem sometimes in the kind of DevOps world. And yeah, okay. But, you know, I think that puts a kind of morbid negative spin on it. You've got to look for the positives too. The project management methodology, getting this meeting done might actually be a dependency on being able to close the project. And, you know, you may not be able to complete this until this is done. And having said that, you also want to make sure that your action items are captured. People are made responsible for those. And then there's some follow up too. And this doesn't have to be just for special projects. Even when things are ticking over, you can have a continuous improvement process for your business as usual activities also.
You know you've done a horrible job on your show if they decide to call it an autopsy. Mr. Klein.
Exactly. No, our practice has been to attempt to get the group together to have a postmortem, you could say. Sounds a little dark, but it gets the job done. I think in the past, before the pandemic, we had an easier time when everybody was in the office. Everybody would stop and just take 15, 10 to just discuss. Now, a lot of our team is not only scattered throughout the US, but all over the world. And the more freelancers we have, as soon as the project is done, they jump onto the next project. So having them stop what they're doing in the next project to have a half an hour meeting sometimes can be a little difficult. So that's been a little hiccup that we've been trying to deal with lately. But yeah, if we could get everybody together, it's a good thing.
Doug, I hope you're going to tell about how you watch back your playbacks.
Yes, I
Go.
am. We do several things. One is I like to take the crew out to have dinner, because most of the time I cannot eat before a show. I just can't do it. We may have a beverage or two, Mr. Fenwick, but it's a good thing because it's right after the event happens, so everything is fresh in everybody's mind. And I will talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between during that, whoever comes out. But we also set up a GoPro and we record what's in the truck. And I record the comms as well. And then sometimes if I'm real ambitious, I will go and edit those things together with the program feed and go back and watch what just happened. And I don't know if some of you know that I own a TriCaster. So sometimes I need to document when that thing has not worked.
Move the cat. Mitchell.
You're only as good as the last show you did. So it makes sense to review back what you've done. All of what everybody's saying is all true. But one of I think the primary goals you should have when you're working with a client is meeting your client's expectations and exceeding them. And you really don't know that until after the show is done and you've been able to review it. And sometimes even with the client, although you may decide you don't want to share everything with them, but enough that you can get a feeling that they thought that this was a good program and that you did your job and things go on. If you don't have these meetings and you don't do the forensic analysis after the fact, you're kind of steering a ship with no windows.
Let's go to the next question.
Okay, this one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Says, NASA linked with the International Space Station before a concert at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. How would they connect to the ISS and route audio from the front of house console to an uplink? How would you bring wired 1 gigabit Ethernet or internet to the front of house in a stadium?
Rupert.
The ISS has all kinds of uplinks and downlinks, and but one of them is just plain old internet. I just had a quick look up there and or looked it up, and at last report they had a 600 meg internet connection, so that part shouldn't be a problem. And that's connected to a network of ground stations and all that stuff. But on the ground for the stadium in Houston, NRG Park, I think it is. I mean, those top tier stadiums are flooded with bandwidth and connectivity, so getting fiber, at whatever bandwidth you want wouldn't be a problem. So as for the exact pipeline, I'm not sure, but connectivity is not a problem.
I apologize. My mic was muted. Courtney.
Rupert said most of it. They do have huge fiber connection to, the livestock show and rodeo. Yeah, from that stadium, I'm sure they are from that venue. I'm sure they have something. And if they didn't, hey, it's NASA. They have satellite trucks, and they're in Houston, so they just roll a sat truck over there with a Ku band and bounce it up and bounce it back, and no problem. Our tax dollars at work.
My hands are off the keyboard. Next question.
Okay, Guy Cochran from Seattle says, Josh, how did the testing of Zoom events go?
Josh.
So, yeah, we did do some testing on the Zoom Test Kitchen and a couple other testing afterwards. We actually have some testing going on later today, but it does seem like the platform is mostly geared towards a turnkey solution for individuals that are running the platform. For example, speakers, once they're assigned, they're expected to take over and start the sessions. You can have the host, Rotem was telling me in his experiments, you can have the host start sessions in that fact, but it can be a little sticky if some things are sort of baked in before you publish. Just because of the way that the Zoom platform is trying to have things more secured. There are a lot of limitations that we're trying to see whether there can be some workarounds if you're looking at it to be a producer, because you don't really have that much authority as a producer other than a speaker. Essentially, you'd come in as a speaker to be a producer. So tests ongoing, definitely some challenges. Some people have opted to use the front end and keep some of the before and after communications on, and then NDI some other Zoom rooms in to get around those issues. But that's some of the things that I'm still looking to overcome.
It seemed to me like the biggest limitation, because I was there with you when you guys were poking around on it, was the fact that you can't add a session or speaker once you publish the data. You know, like once you go public with, hey, we're having an event this week or whatever. A good friend of mine, he is still putting together, Jeff Greenberg, some of you know him, is still putting together the Final Cut Creative Summit, and he's still trying to add people to various panel discussions, and that would be a non-starter if he couldn't do that.
Yeah,
Rupert?
I think some of the limitations are the fact that when you sell someone a ticket, kind of like on Zoom, there's certain things that they're expecting not to change. You know, if you go for one and have like a bait and switch, or if the pricing changes, some of the things are kind of logical, and it kind of comes down to the type of platform that Zoom Events is.
But it could be adding more better speakers. Rupert?
Yeah, I think it's just important to remember in terms of what it can and can't do, that it's going to be inevitably, I think, pretty rapidly evolving. So these new features and adjustments are going to come all the time. And, you know, some of these things, although we think we may have to work around them, may actually get ironed out by Zoom in the process.
Let's go to the next question.
All right, this one comes in from Douglas Carmichael, trying to make a purchasing decision. Says, which screen size would you purchase for a MacBook Pro used with both music and video production and heavy terminal or text editor work? Would I lose much going from a 15-inch screen to a 14-inch screen, or would it be best to go for a 16-inch screen if I can afford it?
Mr. Klein.
So given the parameters that you mentioned, and it seems the difference between the two with the same power output is about $200. Would you consider getting an external monitor to hold your GUI? And also, especially if you're doing a lot of terminal work, because I do that as well sometimes, getting a monitor that will rotate, because doing code in a terminal or Sublime vertically is a lot easier. And then you could do the same thing for your video work, and letting your laptop, which is going to be a much better monitor now with HDR, DCI-P3, just let that be full screen video instead of trying to cram the GUI and the timeline in a small video window. Perhaps for the same amount that you would get the 16, you could expand your view and just have a better experience. That would be my first approach.
Mr. Gleason.
Barriers to entry. I used to be in a facility that was a $300,000 edit suite that had a very large tower and very large monitors, but then the world became portable, and now I run around with a laptop and do basically exactly the same thing, but I am reliant upon external monitors. So remember what you're doing. You've got a CPU. It's got the brains. Now, how do you visualize that? Find something that, I love Charles's point of vertical flipping that monitor, and then and getting away from the microphone because I'm passionate about this. Sorry, thank you, Chris. But yes, I would suggest biggest monitor as you can get, but more importantly, make it possibly an offset monitor, a secondary monitor.
And now, anytime there's an Apple question, we must get Stuart's snarky response. Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, it's not snarky, but the question's actually not really an Apple question. The question is a user experience question, and that doesn't matter which operating system you're running on. Simple thing is, especially for the text work, the bigger screen with bigger font will be more comfortable for long hours of work because you're not tiring your eyes as much. The bigger screen will also let you shift more windows onto your screen for video editing. So you can put your scopes up, you can put your live preview and your timeline up and how you want them. So it's, with one exception, always go for the largest screen you can afford. That exception is if you're doing air travel on a regular basis and you need a small, lightweight machine because of the maximum carry-on load, in which case then you might want. But always the biggest screen you can afford and eye strain. Always think about your eye strain first.
Go, Courtney.
One thing I didn't pay attention to in the Apple thing is the resolution on those three screens, the 14 and the 15 and the 16. Are they all the same resolution but just different screen sizes? That's the question, because
I think
if it's a higher resolution, things will be smaller on the screen and make it harder to see. Possibly.
We call that squinty mode. It's in squinty mode. Next question.
Okay, coming in from hello, Rupert Carmichael. I've produced my 5.1 mix and Atmos sends from an Allen & Heath dLive console. How would I encode it live along with monitoring in a binaural format with headphones?
I think Mickey might have a good answer for this.
Yeah. So for that, for you to be able to decode a live stream of Dolby Digital plus JOC, you need a piece of hardware to do that decoding and output it into typically a MADI stream that you can monitor through your board. A lot of people use, of course, the Dolby decoder, like the DP580, or a similar one. I believe Linear Acoustics also has one that's called the LA5300. Though I'm not sure if those are capable of rendering out to binaural, because most engineers monitor in Atmos if they're mixing Atmos. But you'd need a piece of hardware to do that.
Next question.
Coming in from Alton Christensen in Brooklyn, says Kelylight is a fantastic green screen keyer for After Effects. Is there an equivalent for Final Cut or Motion?
Mr. Gleason. This guy is looking for his mute button. It's the one with the little microphone.
Lost ears.
Has a little line.
Try not to use AirPods.
We'll come back. Go ahead, Sky.
Apologize.
Didn't we go through this before?
No, my iPad, Amber Alert came through. Sorry. The question is that the largest, one of the best green screen apps went into DaVinci Resolve. And so I guess I was going to suggest that since you do have a free app in DaVinci Resolve, you also get the best keyer that was out at one time. And again, sorry, that's not specifically inside of Final Cut or Motion, but one of the best keyers in the world is a part of the package of Resolve.
Mitchell?
Yeah, doing a good key is a tricky thing, and if Kelylight is good enough for you, most of the higher end ones are just simply better. But Kelylight, if you can make it work with Kelylight first, then you're okay. But if you have really tricky things like a bad background or hair, which I don't have, I like to go to Primat, and depending on the host you want to work with, and you're saying Motion and Final Cut, You might have to go with the Primat Studio version that Boris Effects makes, which gives you most of the control. But you can fall into a rabbit hole when you're doing that because there's a lot of settings, and read the manual before you try.
Yeah, I will tell you, we have been keying with this keyer. It's called the Hiwaki keyer, and it's fantastic. There are whole jobs that we have been able to take on because of the speed and the accuracy of that keyer that we would not have been able to finish using other keyers, mainly because of just the sheer amount of stuff. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, Audinate is discontinuing their Dante PCIe card, and he puts a link in. Could you still get ultra-low latency performance from DVS? Will third-party vendors still be producing the PCIe drive interfaces?
Mickey.
Yeah, I believe the lowest latency that one is able to do on DVS is 4 milliseconds, if I recall correctly. Other vendors that have PCI Dante cards are SSL and Focusrite, and they still do manufacture and sell those.
Mitchell?
Also, take a look at Audio Science. They do quite a bit in this area. They've been there, and AVB also. And don't limit yourself to a PCIe card. There's a lot of USB alternatives out there that can accomplish the same thing.
Let's notch our way over to the next question.
What a clever lead-in. From Dan Huber in Erie. On the new MacBook M1 Pro and Max with the notch, if you hide the menu bar, what will you see? Screen wrapping around the notch? He queries.
I have to say, I think that Apple just got tired of everybody complaining about the notch on the phone, and they were like, oh, really? You don't like the notch, huh? Try this. Charles.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with a lot of different apps. I know some people are concerned about all the small options that they have up there, especially in a smaller screen, especially on a 14-inch screen. That's going to be interesting. I'm not that concerned about it because having all the heads at Apple considering all this stuff, because it's going to be one of the first things that people are going to talk about. I'm pretty sure that they have found a solution that will soothe most concerns. Yeah, so I wouldn't be too concerned about it. I like the bigger screen on most parts. I'm pretty sure if you are full screen, depending on the aspect ratio, you won't notice the notch because it'll be just pure black up there. So that's my
I think an interesting thing to ask, and I don't know, I work on a fairly wide screen always, but if you have an application that has a lot of menu items, and then you have to also happen to have a lot of I don't know what they're called, but little menu items on the right hand side, do they ever collide? And then the next question is, when they collide, what happens? Has anybody ever seen that? Where the menu items
Sounds like a challenge.
Where the application menu and the little menu extensions, or I don't know what they're called.
Just drop the screen resolution until they crash into each other.
Stuart, I'm so glad you're here. Let's go to the next question.
All righty then. From Don Modine in Manchester, Connecticut. How do wireless mic systems work at live sporting events? Reporters on the field? How far away are the receivers? And how is interference dealt with?
Mr. Makachor.
So the receivers would typically be placed where the front of house is or where the broadcast desk would be. And the antennas are remoted and placed at what people call antenna farms, and they would have either one or multiple of them throughout a venue. These multiple antennas would be run into an antenna combiner that typically has zoning capabilities, so you can turn on and off antenna zones as needed, depending on where you need the pickup to be, pickup to be, so that you're getting more signal and less noise. And also, these antennas are typically run over an RF over fiber system from the likes of Wisicom or RF Venue.
Rupert?
So one thing you have running in your favor in a stadium is quite easy to get line of sight. Like Mickey says, you get those antennas up in a controlled location, and you can, you can be seeing what it is you're trying to receive quite easily. On top of that, big locations like this will have, RF band plans all organized out. They'll have an RF coordinator, responsible for monitoring that stuff, that stuff, and a skilled RF engineer with the right equipment can find interference very quickly.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, RF engineer or RF officer is what a lot of places call it, and that person's job is to specifically watch all the RF bands, and if something odd comes into play, that they squelch it right away. And the biggest thing was when a lot of people used RF signals to get the signal out of the stadium to broadcast it on to their short bands or whatever. So an RF, any reporter that comes in there will, and a lot of conferences will do this too. If you come in with a wireless system, you'll have to report it. You'll have to get a registration and then therefore get a frequency that you can use and you can use only.
The old days where you just turned your gear on first. Mitchell and Mickey, did I accidentally turn off your hand? Okay, you're both good.
Yeah, the question was answered.
Next question.
Okay, coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia. Regarding the new MacBook Pro, if all is needed is to work on 1080p to 4K video and color grading, would a 14-inch M1 Pro with 16 gigabytes of unified memory suffice? At what point would you need the M1 Max?
Mr. Klein?
There's a lot of variables that could lean you either way. If you're in ProRes, it's going to be perfectly fine. I know people right now working on the M1 that are just in ProRes clips, and they're doing 4K, and they are doing about like 4 streams in 4K on the M1. Now, are you going to be dealing with raw video, and how much color grading are you doing? Are you just doing a color space transform? Are you doing keys or noise reduction? The further you get into compositing and adjusting things, the quicker you're going to grind that thing into a halt. So if it's simple style of editing and you can get everything into ProRes, you should be fine. If you're a much heavier user like I am, I just upped it for the Max because I know that I'm going to reach the limits fairly quickly.
I appreciate having you here, Charles. Next question.
Okay, and I was just going to say, I don't know if maybe Charles can answer. They did build ProRes encode and decode into one of those two, if not both of them, into their video hardware. I don't know, is it only available on the Macs, or is it also available, that encode and the extra GPUs available on the Pro?
No, on the Pros, they do have one encode decode. And I think on the Macs, they have
like 4 streams.
2 of them. They have a 4-stream. It's 2 and 2, I believe. But it's going to be a powerhouse, especially if you can get all your video into ProRes. And even if it's 444, right, it's going to crunch through those things. Now, the only question, once you get into RAW and log and all those things and MXF files, it's going to bring down your system. But if you're doing simple stuff, if you could do it now on an M1, you could do more stuff faster. Yeah, exactly.
So what I hear you saying is more and faster is usually better.
Yeah.
Next question.
One. From Mitchell Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. With a huge success of Apple's M1 Silicon, it appears we're back to Apple vs Intel comparisons of the 90s.
What do you think, Stuart?
I think this is one of the few panels that can actually remember what a PowerPC processor is. There's 2 of them in that, by the way. But yeah, we kind of are, and RISC is always going to be a good choice when it comes to power management. And we need, just as an environmental sense, we need to be looking at these solutions because PCs of any brand eat a lot of power. And if we're moving to solar power and wind power and green energy. We need to reduce it. So the older chips, the complex instruction set chips, they're going to go away regardless of brand. We've already seen that Windows has a version for ARM. Whether somebody's able to step up and actually produce a chip that's not an M1 that can compete with an M1 will be the interesting step over the next 2 to 5 years. Personally, I don't think Alex's explanation of how far ahead Mac is, I don't think they're as far ahead as what they might appear. That'll depend on the GPU manufacturers as well.
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You got to remember that it's an Apple thing. I mean, if you don't think Apple on the brain, this isn't even going to be a debate. This is going to be, at best, it'll be Intel versus AMD. As for Intel, you know, if they left the consumer desktop market right now, they'd still have a lot more to deal with, including enterprise servers, including bringing in Wi-Fi and Ethernet and all that other stuff. They have tons of chips that are in there. So the desktop market's just a small part, and Apple is still in the desktop, the mobile market. Until they grow, until we start seeing a Mac Pro, until we start seeing Mac Enterprise equipment, that's when you start to really think that there's a real Intel versus M1 approach here.
Sky?
What's your problem you're trying to solve? There will always be something that somebody will want to sell you. And so their job is to, yes, make it bigger, faster, but maybe that's not what you need. And so is this a Ford Chevy question? Yeah, probably, because that's the marketing of a thing. Is it gooder or better? I don't know. What's the job? What do you need to get done?
Charles.
I actually concur with what everybody just said. It really depends on the approach. Now, from a server side, yeah, you'll be on Intel for some time because it's only a few people running that. But from a consumer side, I'm not sure if Intel is giving the individual creator, let's say, something that can compare with the trajectory that Apple is heading into right now. So it really depends on what side of the business you're in. If you're running a server farm, you're probably going to be on Intel. Is that going to change moving forward? Well, let's see what Apple comes up with. But I think everybody was surprised with the M1, and everybody's very excited about the M1 Pro and Max. All right, so let's see where this actually goes.
Courtney?
Yeah, if you're talking about the comparisons they did during the presentation of the new chips versus an equivalently outfitted Windows machine, you'll notice that the Windows machines did do better, but the main comparisons they were comparing them on was at TDP is power consumption, and that's where the Macs will really shine because they'll consume a whole lot less power. You'll be able to run them a lot longer to get the same type of performance out of them. And if you don't take the power consideration into effect, you can get faster machines, with the AMD and the Threadrippers and the NVIDIA chipsets, CUDA cores. So, but if you compare them on a power versus performance basis, the Apple's going to win in that race.
Mitchell?
And the reason I asked the question is that I'm very interested in everything. First of all, everything what I've said is correct. It makes sense. But I'm not interested in servers. I'm interested in multimedia production and that type of work. And the way that Apple is constructing their silicon, the unification of the GPU and the CPU and the transfer of information back and forth just begs the question, well, how much better is this than an AMD or an NVIDIA or a PC equivalent? I'm just interested to see these comparison battles starting again because of that, because what is going to be the better machine for production?
I'm going to guess Alex has something to say. He looks like he's about to jump through the screen.
No, I'm not. No, I don't think it's a matter of where they are right now. I don't think that's the issue. I think that the issue is that Apple is pretty good at pacing themselves. So whatever pace you see them increasing the capacity of what they're doing, they're probably going to keep that pace for at least 3 to 5 years. They're not going to like have it double every year for 2 years and then just peter off to 10%, because that from a publicly traded company is really painful. So, we have to remember that this chip that we just saw released was, probably finished 3 years ago. That's probably the time it took to do the fabs and do everything else that was required. So they know where they're going with it, and they know how fast it needs to be, and they know that they can double it again. I think that they know that they can double it again next year and the year after, and that pace is almost impossible to keep up with, in the, in other infrastructures. I'm not pointing to where they are now. It's absolutely correct that they're not as fast as everything out there. For the performance, it's fine, but everyone else is going to have to throw more wattage at it. And at some point, the problem is that the architecture is cleanly superior. To share the memory and the buses between, on a single chip is an absolutely superior model that is impossible to reproduce unless you can do everything. You have to write the metal, you have to have Xcode, you have to have all those things. And so when I talk about it, I'm not talking about where they are now. It's just that I'm looking down the path and going, oh, if they keep going at this pace, it gets real ugly real quick in about the next 2 or 3 years, as far as like, and they don't keep on, they don't have to change the prices either. So they just keep the prices are pretty much what they've been forever. And they're just simply scaling up the thing. It gets more complicated as we go into 2022 and 2023. That's all. You ready for me to take it back, Chris?
Sure.
All right. Let's jump into the next question.
Okay, coming in from Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is it appropriate to, as a client, for feedback after production, something like, do we have any strikeouts, any foul balls, any home runs?
Go ahead, Sky.
I think this is a relationship question. What is the problem you're solving for that person? If that person is hired you to do a thing, then yes, your metaphor, if they are a baseball person and that metaphor works, that's a great concept of how to, evaluate your service that you provided for that individual. But maybe they don't understand baseball. So again, how much future work do you want to be doing with this individual, and how much consequently time are they willing to spend with you to make their life better? Remember, that's why you're there.
Good.
So if the trash man doesn't do a good job, do I want to have a beer with him to talk about it? I don't know.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, so the one way to turn me off as a client is to send me a survey. How did we do, asking for feedback. It should be, like Sky says, about maintaining a relationship. You want to have those open channels of communication each way. If it's a regular customer, hopefully you have found your rhythm with them at a collaborative but still a executive kind of summary level. Like we talked about earlier, if you have these regular improvement meetings in your own team, it may not be necessary to involve the client in all that detail, but it might be helpful then to be aware that that's at least a process that you have and that you know how to take care of your business. If the wrap up of the project involves sending them the final invoice, I'd want to be pretty sure that they're happy before that lands on their doorstep. Likewise, I don't want to be sent the final invoice. If there's still loose ends, I'll just sit on it until they call me and figure out what's going on.
Mitchell?
We like to tell the client when we're auditioning for the job or we're looking at a proposal that we want to move the needle. I mean, that seems to resonate with a lot of clients. So asking them whether we move the needle, since they're ultimately the only ones that could tell you whether it did or not, it's important to ask. And it's important to find out. But if you invite them, then you don't have to beg for it after the fact.
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't normally ask, but I got to say, I really enjoy when the client sends my supervisor an email or note that they don't send to me, but they mention me by name. Because quite often, at the point where I'm in a job, most people don't even have to know my name. But when they mention my name, I will say that feels really good. I know that's kind of a reverse of the question, but it's good to ask, I think.
Next question.
All right. Coming in from sometime panelist, but not here today, Leo Mendel in Penner, UK. It appears that the new MacBook Pro only supports HDMI 2.0 and no 2.1. So no 4K at 120 frames per second.
Go ahead, Charles.
They listen to Alex.
Go ahead, Charles.
Like, I think outside of the gaming world, not a lot of people are creating content at, let's say, 120 right now. It is quite a crunch on most machines. So I'm not too concerned about that. I think moving forward, that'll be a thing, but yeah.
I believe the monitor itself supports it. So it's
Yeah, the monitor's fine.
But I think it has less to do with the connector. It has more to do with the GPU usage, or the resource usage to pump that out of there. So by not giving it to you, I think it cuts off that need there. Next question.
This one comes in from San Francisco, and Tim Gross says currently feeding 12 PCs running Zoom and Teams calls via AJA uTaps SDI into a Ross Carbonite switcher. Looking for a more elegant solution. NDI and Macs?
The other thing you can do, of course, is cards. So we use cards inside of our PCs. So we have Blackmagic cards, either duos or 8Ks typically, so that we can do send and returns and multiple outputs if we need to. So that's the more elegant way than having dongles, hanging out. Actually, I don't know that. We actually use the HDMI out of those computers. Those are for the inputs. We have dreams of using the Blackmagic outputs. I think that the Blackmagic doesn't see. You can do it if on our Macs, we can see Zoom ISO will output up to 4 per computer. So, but on the PC, we can't do that yet. So we're still stuck with Zoom support. Next question.
Coming in from Eric Price in Kansas City. Says, my Zoom client seems to be struggling to generate the feeds for the grid view, so that as the show moves from a speaker view to the grid, several show no video network issue or client in need of a restart.
Go ahead, Rupert.
It could be either of those things. I mean, maybe just time for some general housekeeping. Do a restart, check for updates in Zoom, check that you are wired if it's available to you, and avoid Wi-Fi. Do a quick speed test, see if you're getting big amounts of jitter or something like that. Also check your statistics in Zoom, see if that gives you any clues as to packet loss or stuff like that. But probably some general, if it's a new problem, some general housekeeping should tidy that up.
Go with Jeffrey.
Absolutely everything that Rupert just said. Plus, I would probably call your whoever is supplying your internet line and have them run a test just to make sure that everything is working on that end.
Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, looking for a hardware box solution to mirror HDMI for a teleprompter feed. Displays that include the feature are $200 to $250. A decimator costs $300. Discontinued boxes were sold at much higher prices. Budget hardware suggestions.
Mitchell?
You don't have to spend a lot of money to do this. This is a little device that I bought from Amazon. It's a Chinese manufactured 1-in, 2-out HDMI box, and it's like $30. So the only problem with them is whether or not it's got the copyright protection on it and it blocks it. But a lot of them don't. They're just not allowed to tell you if they do or don't. You have to try them out first.
But that does do the mirroring?
Yeah.
Go, Courtney.
Oh, I didn't know it would do the mirroring. I don't know how you would access a menu to flip the image for.
Yeah.
By mirroring, we mean reversing left for right, not duplicating. Right. You understand?
Okay. No, it doesn't do that.
Oh, it doesn't do that. Yeah. So in that case, there are monitors. I'm just going to say there are monitors you can get in the $150 to $160 range. They're not super high resolution. They'll be fairly low resolution, but they're used for security. Look in the security monitor field, because those monitors do have left, right, reverse for some reason.
Lilliput makes a lot of them that have the left, right, and vertical reverse.
Lilliput or ICANN.
Yeah. Next question.
All right, coming in from Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. Picture frame TVs. My wife has requested we get one for our new house. Anything I should be aware of when shopping?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I think one thing to be aware of was just how much you like being married. And if that's what's been requested, that's what you want to provide.
Josh.
Yeah, so this is more of a fixture. It's going to be a price premium over the equivalent version, and you're not going to have the accessibility to ports, but that's sort of the trade-off. So it looks nice. You're going to have to sort of frame things in, have all of the utilities sort of mounted behind the television, which makes for a nice thing, but you kind of lose access to it afterwards. So just keep that in mind. What type of devices you're going to want to connect it to it ahead of time.
Sorry, I was in the wrong thing. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, the biggest thing is going to be the conduit to get the connectivity. A friend of mine actually just installed 3 of the LG GXs that are designed to be picture frames. And once they are mounted properly, they look beautiful on the wall. Now, the hardware for mounting is actually different from the regular one. It's actually designed just to be completely flush. So you will be having to cut into your walls and make sure that the connectivity make some conduit or just something like that so you can get access to what you need to get to. That's going to be the main thing that we had to struggle through trying to just mount everything. It's just cutting out everything, conduit build.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to recommend the DeWalt double compound miter saw. It has dust collection, quite accurate. You can make any picture frame you want.
There you go. Next question.
All right, this may be a continuation or a.
I think it got repeated. I think we had a couple of those. We'll move that one out.
A couple of that one.
Yeah, they got a couple of them. Kind of. I've been trying to sort through. Anyway, go.
The next
Same thing with it.
Yeah.
From Douglas Carmichael is let's do this one. Apple featured DaVinci Resolve in a prominent place on their MacBook Pro page. Considering they produce the NLE of their own, why might they have highlighted a competitor?
Go ahead, Charles.
I've said this before, I don't want to start a fight, but it is designed as a finishing tool. That's how it was created. Now, it's not the DaVinci Resolve that was 10, 15 years ago, but it is a powerhouse. And what you get for the price, even if you just get the free version, what you can do with it, it's amazing. And they were one of the first ones to make a version for the M1. And I have to say, it changed the performance in a very noticeable way. And even that same version on an Intel worked much faster. So
I think,
yeah.
And I think that Apple's very conscious of being a good neighbor. You know, they're a much bigger company, and they could easily really, and the thing is a thriving developer ecosystem is really good for Apple. They get much more out of developers wanting to work with Apple and engaging with them and supporting what they're doing and updating quickly and all those things that Blackmagic does and that Maxon does. And you see them get prominent. That's not by accident. That's because they're working really quickly with Apple. They're making changes. They're updating things. They're doing press releases. They're doing all those things. That does way more for Apple than showing off Final Cut. You know, from Apple's perspective, they don't have anything to prove with Final Cut. They're not trying to push it down everybody's throat. It's always better. I think they're better off, promoting their partners. Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, do you know Colleen Pendergrass at Apple? She just announced yesterday on Instagram she's leaving the Final Cut team. Super sad for the Final Cut team. She posted a picture with her with a stack of patents that was like 2.5 feet tall in her name. I for this question, I don't think Apple is that afraid. I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't think they feel like they need any they don't need any help. You know, I think that the big thing is when you're a company that large, you also have to deal with all kinds of antitrust stuff. So using your size to press down on all the stuff around you is just going to get you more attention that you don't want. Next question.
Coming in from Guy Cochran, sometimes here on the panel, but not today. Seattle. Thoughts on the new DJI Ronin 4D?
My wallet went nuclear. Nuclear. I sometimes it catches on fire, and sometimes it's just like, oh my gosh, I got to start collecting. I got to start selling things so I have enough money to go buy that. That's out of my budget. It's not something I had planned for, but wow, like that just came out today, I think, and it is So it is a 4-axis. So it solves the one big problem that a lot of the DJI Ronin stuff has, which is it solves the Z axis. So it takes them one giant step towards, my brother's a Steadicam operator. I'm never going to tell you that you can do the same things you can do. A talented Steadicam operator, especially one with a Trinity head, like what my brother has, is going to produce a better shot than someone with a Ronin. But for $8,000, $7,000 or $8,000 for an 8K camera, full frame sensor, Z-axis, correction. Wow. like there's a lot of corporate and smaller video and other things that you could, and a lot of just other pieces that you could put it in. I think I feel like we just keep on seeing new products coming out that are, maybe they were waiting until the supply chain or something, but they come out and they're just stunning, go ahead, Charles.
Do we know what format is shooting? Like
in the past, I think they have ProRes and RAW. I mean, their ZenMoose 7 X7, I think, is doing RAW and ProRes. So it's already, we know they already have the capability of that. What this one shoots, I don't know, but this is the next one up. I also I think that the ZenMoose 8 or 9 or whatever, those are new too. So I'm really glad I didn't buy. I was really close to getting a ZenMoose 7. I was glad I waited. So anyway, it's super impressive. We'll see if we can somewhere down the road get a hold of one and see if we can't do some tests with it, because it looks like a beast. Yeah. Next question.
We take a quick note of the file format that they're using. They're using exFAT, so we can go across all brands of PC or Macs or Linux
exFAT's
without a problem.
Yeah, exFAT's,
and it's RAW. It's 422 H.264, and beautiful.
Right.
And ProRes RAW.
Yeah. So it's impressive. Yeah, it's a pretty exciting. It looks pretty exciting from the outside, and DJI has gotten. You just keep watching DJI kind of scale. They're another one of those companies where there's a handful of companies that you just keep watching, and they just keep on adding. Like, they went from being inexpensive or something else to now just pushing down the path of really high quality electronics. Blackmagic, DJI, Behringer. In places, companies that we didn't expect that from. Next question.
Coming in from Dan Huber in Erie. It says, no Ethernet on the new MacBook Pro M1 Max, since you can charge the MacBook Pro with the USB-C. Could you use the M1 iMac power supply with the network built in?
Go ahead, Mickey.
The M1 iMac uses a proprietary connector, a proprietary multi-pin connector that has magnetic capabilities. It's not a USB-C.
Next question.
Didn't they say that you can charge it through he's saying if you could charge it through the USB-C, could you use the power through the USB-C?
But the iMac isn't using that. The iMac is using a different connector. It's not a USB-C connector for power, because it wants more power.
Next question for the first hour. It looks like Ted Claudio from Quezon City in the Philippines. Is Zoom Rooms guaranteed to output 1080p for its 3 NDI and up to 3 HDMI outputs?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Guarantee is such a strong word, but getting 1080p in the first place out of Zoom Rooms is going to be dependent on it being on a 1080p account. So without that, you'll get the 720 bump with Zoom Rooms, but 1080 you'll need it on the account. Now, Zoom does publish the system requirements for Zoom Rooms and the system requirements for 1080p, but to push 3 outputs consistently, I certainly wouldn't want to skimp on system specification. You'd want to be up there in terms of the power of that system. And if you're going to need 3 HDMI outputs, then okay, you can achieve that with display link and stuff like that. But if you've got a machine that has 3 or even 4 native HDMI outputs, then it might put you in better shape. But if on top of that, then you also want to come out NDI as well, you've got to look at network bandwidth and that kind of stuff. So if treated with care, you will get it, but the wind does need to be blowing in the right direction. And also watch out that for the iPad thing that we see, where if you have an iPad in your meeting, it might drop those speakers down to 720. So just relies on a lot of things.
All right. we're going to go ahead and change subjects here. So when we're getting ready for Office Hours 2.0 next week. Andy and Jonathan will be out here to hang out with all of us, and they'll be working on it. And what we're kind of doing is thinking more and more about the graphics, and so we're looking at a lot of other people's graphics, and I thought that it'd be useful to look at some SuperSources. I also will show you a kind of a wireframe of what we're thinking about, and the idea is for all of us just to kind of brainstorm things that we'd like to see. So if you're watching, go ahead and use the questions as you can ask questions while we're kind of talking through the first part, but the second half of the hour we'll be brainstorming for Office Hours 2.0 of graphics that you think that we should be producing for it. Right now, specifically to SuperSources, but think about everything. You can put those up. So if you can go ahead and put those in, and just put comment : before you do it, so we know it's not a question. And we'll deal with the questions in the first half an hour, and then we'll deal with it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut to just a couple things that I collected. Let's see here. So if we take a look at this, let's see here. So now I'm going to kind of jump through a couple of these. I do this thing where when I do these compiles that sometimes I cut the wrong piece. So we'll see how this goes. So here is CNBC. This is not the least amount that we'll see, but this is as a SuperSource, this is pretty much how we don't want. And again, this is a thought process. We want it to be all image. We don't want it to be any branding. We're just going to stick our lower thirds and everything else over top of people. That is a choice. So I think it's a little boring as far as that goes, and not super flexible as you start to move forward. And for this one's kind of again, one of these things where I have a hard time seeing everybody, or I have a hard time. Just raise your hand if you want to make a comment as a panelist. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I guess the question, looking at that piece, is whether or not you want to bevel the edges, whether or not you want to show through the background. It's those subtle things that make it look more than just a flat out two up shot. So I would say,
I will admit that beveling the edges over the video feels very 90s to me, or maybe 80s. Like it's like an effect that I haven't used I will admit that I have used it, but it's been a long time.
I think an overlay would look nicer around to frame the box a little bit. Some kind of nice little 3D overlay.
Yeah. So anyways, let's take a look at another one here. Here's Squawk Box. This is another version of this. Now, this is where we start thinking about SuperSources here. Now, one thing that's interesting is this SuperSource is actually, this graphic here is going over top of this graphic. So that's a lot of times we don't see that comp, and the reason for that is that you're dropping video over top of the background. So as soon this is a more complex composite, and so a lot of times they don't build them that way to kind of keep it simple. And again, I think you guys are gonna have to just talk out, because when it gets spotlit, I can't see you, so I can't see the panel. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney. You're just gonna have to. You guys are gonna have to talk over it. Okay. Just find a place to talk, because I can't see you when the spotlight goes on.
Is the gradient we're seeing at the top and the bottom just a function of your screen capture, or is that?
No. The gradient at the bottom is because I was moving quickly, and I think that I grabbed the wrong. I do this thing where I cut. There we go.
I see. Oh, so that's part of the interface. Yeah, the interface.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
I was moving fast, so I got up really early this morning to do this, and then had something else pop in, and so I was doing it in between things. So anyway, one of the things that you want to look at though is these looping graphics in the background. So there's geometry there. Like they're actually, it seems subtle and it's not super complex, but it's still there and it adds energy to it. And that's something that I'd like us to think about, related to that, especially how we, deal with when we're thinking through this as, just what we can do with HDR, what we can push, as far as the graphics go. I think this one's a little too dimensional, but I think that it's an interesting way of kind of handling it there. Any other comments there?
Speaking of dimensional, where it says in the middle there, Netflix falls despite subspeed, that's got an overlay. Mm-hmm. The left-hand side of that, where there's a looping animation for like the brightness or like a reflection off of it.
Mm-hmm.
That little bar to the side, because it doesn't extend across the bottom or across the top, it actually looks like somebody's placed one graphic over the top of an incoming feeds graphic. Kind of, yeah, same with the graph itself. It's got that same, the bar down the side doesn't extend past the frame. So it's like,
well, and
really
again, these are
nasty look of something put it over the top of somebody else's feed.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
You know what it does, Alex? It does what you were commenting on the CBS Sports, is it because there's a little bit of overlap. It only takes a tiny bit. It gives it that extra dimensionality that is a nice look.
Right.
And by the way, I just want to make a statement. Everybody wants to be a creative director, so this is a very brave thing that you're doing here, keeping it open for everybody.
And I somehow, I don't know what I did here. I do this thing where I'm cutting quickly, and I somehow ended up with the opposite of what I was looking for a lot of the time here. I don't know what happened. Anyway, this is this wins for the least amount of design. I'm sure they spent a lot of meetings on it, but it feels like the least amount. This is the BBC. We're just going to butt everything up together, and it's definitely a choice. I mean, that they're looking at it, but it's a very very minor look as far as that goes. It's probably not one that I necessarily subscribe to. It's an interesting way to do that. Here is there we go. Sports Center. I kind of like this as far as a split screen goes. What do people think of that? Do they? I mean, it's kind of a nice geometry.
It's a way to get your bug into the middle of the screen so that people don't steal it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I thought it was kind of nice. And you can use this as a wipe too. So I've seen them use this where you'll see this and then it'll wipe over and go back to a full screen at the same time, which is kind of an interesting way of using it as well. So
would they do a resize so that would move over to the left if the picture on the left was a little bit smaller?
What it looks like, sometimes it looks like what they've done is they've framed this person on this side of the screen in the camera. They've keyed it over, and when they spin this over, it's just the image. They're not resizing anything. It just opens it up, and when they do it that way, it's super impressive. Like I just felt like, wow, that for some reason it just felt really smooth when they made that transition.
Are you sure the left shot isn't repoed in a DVE a little bit and taking a center cut out of it?
Well, no, I'm saying they sometimes do that, but there have been a handful of times in this show where they, not in this show specifically, but I've watched their graphics before, and there's sometimes where they literally have him framed the way he should be. The other guy's there and that split, and then they push it over, and it
to just reveals all the looking room.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
And then they cut away from it immediately. But there's something about it. You can tell that. I mean, obviously they did it on purpose.
But I guess you'd have to ask, what is the mechanism of the graphic? Is the graphic there to move things around the screen? Are they there to look pretty?
Well, it's separating it, and then you get to brand it at the same time. I mean, one of the big things with SuperSources is the opportunity to brand it. So when you see, I got this somehow backwards. Yeah, so I somehow got all of these backwards.
So here's tailing and topping instead of topping and tailing.
Yeah, exactly. Here you can see more graphics that are kind of added to the background there, but this is a very image heavy shot there, and so that the
and their transparency on the right side, that's interesting too. So the background's showing through on the data, the stats. On the right.
Under the data, yeah. So they make this, globe. They put the data over top of that. But this is a big globe here that is kind of interesting, interesting process here. But again, these are the kind of graphics that people throw back there, and you have to decide how much you want it, for instance, also in focus or sharp. As you kind of work through that. And as we're doing this, go ahead and throw questions and comments in, and then we'll talk about a little bit of that. So, you were going to say something, Chris?
It's an interesting thought, and I'm only say this half facetiously, but there is so much data inside of Mukana. You could almost pull data out and generate graphics. This is Douglas's 7th question this hour.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's definitely. We can definitely have a lot of grabbing. This is the way not to do a SuperSource. I just want to point out, this is so bad. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Okay, that's all I want to say. It's just like, oh my gosh, it just happened to be right after this, and I was like, my eyes.
Where is that coming
So,
from?
I don't know. It's some.
It looks
Well,
like
the White
It's
House.
coming from the island.
Oh
Well,
my
it's coming from
gosh.
the island of low contrast.
The White House
Isn't-
does that in the
Yeah.
background, so they're already super sourcing. So this is a super source inside a super source.
Exactly, and it's just so.
Yeah, the one in the background
Bad.
looks like a high school science fair project.
Yeah, I mean, they're just such an.
Is he standing in front of a video wall?
Yeah, I stand in front of a video wall. It's just, and someone actually spent time designing that. Anyway, all right, I want to move on. Sorry, there. So here's this one is probably more designed. This is kind of more of your kind of clean design. So the out of focus lets everything else be focused. Here's kind of, now I'll show you the mock-ups that I have. I'm actually planning to go the other direction, which is that I want the host to be smaller than the panelists. The host is there, but the most common way to do this is have the host be the largest in the frame. But I'd like to have it, I'd kind of like to reverse that. That process. Now, one thing you will notice is we have a lot of conversations about with folks that usually these are all squared so that you can put it over top of them, but you can also put them on top of it. And a lot of times these, I don't know whether this one is, if you don't see anything crawling, yeah, it's semi-transparent up here. So you can see that those edges are semi-transparent, but probably not. They're probably still edges because you can set that in the switcher more easily. When you start getting, we're going to play around with doing things a little bit more aggressive, but as soon as you start designing the mortises, things get more complicated pretty quickly.
I just, again, I know I'm yakking a little too much here, but sometimes you do graphics just to show off a little bit, and sometimes you do it because you need them in order to show what you're presenting. And I would say it's better to err on the clean side, and you can always add to it later. Yeah. But like ESPN seems to have a good sensibility for that.
Yeah, and this is I think a mixture of both, which is that this is a pretty darn good design in my opinion, as far as a super source goes. But it also, it does what it needs to do. This is also something that we talk about. It's more complicated. We are going to do this with Office Hours 2.0, which is lower thirds in the super sources because we can. so we're going to be doing some of that. And again, look at the design above and below. You can really see there's a lot of softly moving. It's a really simple geometry. I've been watching this one. We went through this more on Monday, but it's like these cubes, like elongated rectangles that are extruded out that are kind of moving back and forth within each other, and then blurred or softened or out of focus, and it's a nice look.
This one really bothers me that the third box is not as wide as the other two.
It does bother me too.
Driving me nuts. You need to take it off the screen.
It's not that. It does bother me. And the funny thing is that the other side, it's like the whole thing is off because the other side is actually too big.
They're all three different.
All three are different.
And take it off the screen. I can't look
anymore.
Is the
whole thing moving? Like
the
if you scroll.
I'm walking away.
No, it was just that was the
the
frame.
boxes move across the screen like a film strip? The other thing noting, the sporting ones seem to be a lot cleaner and a lot more elegant than especially the financial ones. The financial ones were just a mess of data, and it's just it was too much.
Well, again, for those financial ones, I will tell you that a lot of research has been done, and all that data increases view time. It gives people something else to do while people
have
are
got to
boring.
sit there to go through it. It's not about them being able to pass the data. It's how much effort you've got to put in to go through and find what you're looking. So you're looking at it for longer.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing is when it's boring, they'll look at the other stats for a little while before they choose to leave, and which is boring most of the time. So it's important. Go ahead, Mickey, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of when the image takes up most of the screen, because I've seen a lot of mortises wherein the image is just, maybe like just a third of the entire frame. I really like it when the image is maximized as much as possible.
Yeah.
Alex, is anything possible in 2.0? I mean, can you build whatever you want?
Within reason, yeah. I mean, it's a frame. It's going to be 1920 by 10, or it's going to be 4K, so it's going to be 16 by 9. That's a rule right now. We're not going to 9 by 16, but inside the 16 by 9 format, I think anything's possible. So, This is a pretty basic one. I'm not that impressed. It feels like it's like a box inside of a box. Seems like they just ran out of time, but they, some animated geometry in the background. So not that impressive. So you can see that even in big broadcasts. Here's another one of those ones. It's all image. Yeah, go ahead.
For something like that, do you crop the video and put it in, or do you put a frame on top of?
It depends.
That?
On that one, I think they crop the video. I think they put the video. You can go under or over, so it doesn't. It just depends on what you're trying to do. So, with a lot of these, I think they put the videos over top, but anytime you see graphics sitting on top of them, it means that they put it, if it's round, like I like to round corners because it messes with broadcasters who don't, it's harder, it's harder to round the corners. And so just that little change makes things more complex.
Jeffrey, I think they also frame it center so that they can go full screen with any one of those boxes. They don't crop it. A lot of these, especially if you want to animate from that one up to one. So if you want to take this person on the right and zoom up like a DVE, you need to it can't be over top of it. It has to be a simple outline around the image. It can't, you can't get as creative when you do that to make that work.
And I do frames over video, and I also do jump cuts, so things don't move around and then mess up the whole look.
Right. Yeah, no. Again, we started getting into more of these animations because of Mix Effect Pro, because we could. Like, hey, we can just hit a button and it'll just go, woo. But to do that, you want to keep, again, just outlines around the images rather than doing anything else. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah. What is it called in vMix? There's what do they call it? A morph, or where the boxes will
move
zoom
around.
in and out.
Merge.
I am absolutely not a fan of that. It screams a feature that we can do, but just because you can doesn't mean you shouldn't. You should. I think there's a time or two in the beginning of a show where it's like, and now let's bring on our panel, squeeze back. But that'd be the last time I would ever do it.
Right.
It drives me nuts. It just seems super amateur to me.
We've had some that we did.
While we're talking about things that annoy, can we just discuss the lighting on the person on the left-hand side of the screen at the moment?
That's a different topic.
They should be fired.
And how come this has rounded corners in the bottom, but square on the top?
Yeah, so we'll stick with the SuperSources for now. But I find that white and light backgrounds behind the SuperSources are not great. I think that the SuperSources generally want to have a darker background than the foreground, in the process there. So but I think that that's my looking at that one, and I think
that's the new color palette.
I can't find anything. Oh, there's the last one here. What's interesting here is, again, feels a little low budget, but what you have here is they've kind of created this lip on the front, where you have the softened, and this is just a little Photoshop thing to do that. And then they've got a little bit of animation in here, as you kind of move through it. So again, those kind of backgrounds can be, and there's simple geometry moving around, but just a quick image. And again, this one kind of, for me, feels like they, didn't spend a lot of money on it, but I'm sure they did. So I always think, to get back to, I know I told Stuart we're only talking about SuperSources, but I love the fact that this week feels like they have to put this thing 5 times down the side for every one of these inserts. I'm like, really? Like are already.
That looks like my local council meetings. Really, that looks like my local council meetings, and it annoys me.
They've been doing that for years. It drives me crazy.
I will point out, do we want to discuss the way of lighting to get a decent separation between the person and
we'll talk about that
video background that they're putting in?
We'll talk about inserts. Inserts is a whole nother hour.
Okay,
we can talk about. So anyway, so that's some examples for us to start thinking about those, and for you to start thinking about them. That just kind of a way to start thinking about how to design those and what people are thinking about as they do it. Do we have any questions, Courtney?
Why, yes, we do. From Douglas Carmichael. Of all people, to build an experiment with SuperSources on an ATEM Mini Extreme ISO, for example, how would you get multiple video streams out of a single Mac?
You actually have a fair number. I'm sorry, just today has been a little off. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think you're starting with the wrong thing. I don't think a Mini Pro is going to do it for you. I think you need at least an Extreme, because if you're going to go with 4 inputs, you've already maxed out your Mini.
And you don't need. I mean, you don't need. You can definitely do this with. SuperSource can just be 2 up. So you can have just 2 inputs. To do that.
Nobody was mentioning 4. So
He
I
did
would
say-
go
he did
into
say
a
Mini Extreme there.
I'd plug into a Sonnet
he said
and
no.
then a deck link, and then into your board from there with a conversion.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Douglas did mention a mini extreme, so that's 8 inputs with the ability of doing a super source. You can simply play back. If it's just for experimenting, you could put a couple videos on a couple QuickTime playouts on multiple HDMI outputs from your computer and feed that into the ATEM. But if you do have ISO recordings of an event, you can bring those all into, say, QLab and play those out either through multiple surfaces and within QLab either through HDMI directly out of a computer or via a deck link, as mentioned by Mitchell.
Yeah. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Ted Claudio in Quezon City in the Philippines. What are the best tools to easily create SuperSource templates and control on the fly? And what will be in the boxes for the ATEMs?
Mitchell?
If you go to Adam Tao's website for MixFX, he's got some actual tutorials that show you how to build that into Photoshop, and you can build all the over and under keys that you need to create the effect.
Yeah, there's a lot of different places that you can do that. So you can do it in Photoshop. I build a lot of my Motion SuperSources in Motion, in Apple's Motion. It's a $50 app that builds, because of one of the nice things, you saw all those designs that were going on behind. Motion does that really well because it's got a replicator. So you grab a couple simple shapes, you turn them on, you replicate them across a lot of things, and then you can set that up really, really fast and easy. So for moving overlays or underlays, I find Motion to be great. Photoshop is another great one as far as that goes. And then animating those, or to open them up, to animate the frames on top of it, MixFX Pro has been what we've kind of really leaned on to make that work inside the ATEM. Go ahead, Courtney.
Can the Stream Deck be used to route the certain inputs to certain boxes within using macros in the ATEM?
Yes, you should be able to do that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can definitely tell the ATEM what you want those things to do. Now, we're doing most of that via MixFX Pro. So we're talking to MixFX Pro, which then tells the ATEM what to do. so that's kind of the that's kind of the way we kind of work through that.
When they finalize the companion module, you can do it natively inside Streambox.
Yeah. Next question.
Coming in from some youngster named Chris Fenwick in California. It says, what are we going to do with Mickey's shot in the SuperSource?
I don't know what you mean, Chris. I don't know what you mean, Chris.
Yeah, I know. We'll have to figure that out. It's going to be, it is going to be one of those things that we have to figure out how to center everybody for this. There will be, I think that part of next week will be us adjusting to the fact that heads need to be a pretty specific size and place for this to work well. So we'll have to play with that a little bit. You'll see that when we start looking at the SuperSources. Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA, says, what Office Hours 2.0 planned features would the graphics be designed for? For example, Office Hours 2.0 program modes? What would benefit from theme transitions? In other words, first hour, second hour presentation versus Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some interesting opportunities there of, the second hour having a slightly different color scheme, the first hour having its own. I think that there is, that's something for people to think about, for us to kind of brainstorm on. But I think that there is definitely a real opportunity to think about questions. I'll show you some things that I have. Well, I can show you actually now. So we'll jump into this for a second, and I'll show you what we're looking at here, or what I'm kind of. These are just, they're obviously not going to be the final. One thing when I do templates, I make sure that I don't add any design elements so that people don't get distracted. It's just like black and white, rough layout, just so we can think about it. So so this is kind of, this is one view of the host, talking to somebody or dealing with a question. So what I did is I thought of basically, this is if one person raises their digital hand, because what's going to happen next week is that if you raise your digital hand before we hit answer, the button answer, it generates the super source. So anybody who asks a question after that doesn't end up in the super source because the super source gets built from, it goes and grabs how many people do I have in the answer. When we get to the end of the people who had already raised their hand, it goes back to the, you can see it goes back to the panel. So it'll drop back to the panel. That's kind of the, if there's more questions, or if if there's more answers or the answers come in late, the panel this goes back to it. And all this is going to be as an overlay that we'll design that just sits over top of the 16 up. So we have a multi-view 16 and what Zoom ISO is doing is actually grabbing the last 16 people who talked. So that's how it'll be 16. And we are often near 16 anyway. And so it'll go to that, and I'll just apply this over top of it when we have it there. But when people have their hands up in the back end and they're going through it, if it's one person, the thought here is this is this is what one up looks like, two up, so it'll grab that here. And again, the difference that we're seeing from then almost everything I've looked at for SuperSources, they always have the host be really big and the guests be small. And I kind of want to reverse that so that the panelists that are talking have the larger, images. And then the idea is that we'd have the question kind of displayed here for us, so that we can, kind of see what the question is that we're addressing. 3, this is all pretty much 4. So the idea is to kind of stick, and again, to Mickey's point, I wanted to make it take up as much space as I could, but from a horizontal perspective, the longer those windows are to put people in, the less we have. Now, one other option is to go with a 4 up, kind of in a weird kind of a mini grid is another way to kind of fill that space. So it may be something that we experiment with. But right now I'm kind of taking the more traditional route of verticals with folks. And then the only other one is if someone's presenting something, you could have, them here and have the screen share, that's there. And so if folks that are watching have comments, go ahead and throw those in. And if the panelists have comments, go ahead and throw those in as well. Go ahead, Courtney.
When that one you just had up with the screen share, are you going to pull the screen scrape in the area of interest from the Zoom screen share where it takes the person's picture and puts it in an insert, or are you going to be bringing that in separately?
Right. Yeah, I have to admit that when I was designing it, I was thinking about our system. Our system takes multiple outputs per person. So we have to figure out how we even handle screen share with what we're doing. So that'll be something that we have to think through. I'll have to talk to, I think that I might have to add a computer to do this, so that the screen share always goes to this might be like a Zoom room that always gets the screen share kind of thing. So I'll have to talk to Andy about that. But as I designed it, our system does it because every computer that we have inside of 090 has 2 outputs. It has the person and the screen share that are going out of the second output is the room is always screen share from that person. And so, but I think that we might have to build another computer for that. So anyway, other comments or questions? Okay, well, let's jump into the comments and questions that we have from our producers.
Another one coming in from Douglas Carmichael says, what is the generic term for a super source, even when Blackmagic hardware is not used?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Historically, it was a quad split, but 4 up, 2 up, 3 up works fine.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I've heard them use either DVE or 2 boxes, 3 boxes to call out specific layouts of multiple people in what Blackmagic calls a super source.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael again, Stuart mentioned the 4-headed breakout box Chris Fenwick uses to get 4 video streams from a Mac. What brand and model is it?
Mr. Fenwick?
I use the pluggable, I don't remember the model. I think actually I may have opened up the website for that. Just let me take a quick look. Nope, sorry. It's the one I like. You don't need AC power, which just simplifies things. It gives you the option of 2 HDMIs or 2 help me out. What is the other port called?
DPI.
No,
Display
link. Yes, and then no, it's not display link. Display port.
Display port.
Display port.
But and I'll say this because I've had a lot of people contact me on Discord. Hey, why isn't this thing working? You have to install the display link software.
There you go. Next question.
Coming in from Ted Claudio in Quezon City in the Philippines. Mix Effect Pro or H2R here to record SuperSource layouts. Which one is for which users?
I mean, for the SuperSource stuff, we're using Mix Effect Pro for what we're doing. And I think that the SuperSource layouts, if I remember correctly, and this is, I haven't, when I went to them before, you kind of did a cut and paste out of here to record. Is that still the way that those SuperSources work, where you're kind of building them up? Mix Effect Pro is, for us, at least when I was doing my initial testing, was for this was a little smoother, just a little faster to do it. But I think that here to record works well as well. It's just that here to Mix Effect had more of the tooling that we needed at the time we did it. And I haven't used the other one for a little while because of that. Next question.
From Ted Claudio in Quezon City in the Philippines. Any precautions or tips when using a green screen or chroma key on the panelists when they're SuperSources, when on SuperSources on the ATEMs?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Well, obviously you don't want to wear the same color as the background. That's the first one. The other thing is to have consistent lighting in the background. The other thing is you don't want to get super close with the ATEM device because it's not going to show detail around the hair. It's going to be kind of a cutout in the way it does it. So try to keep the person back a little bit rather than try to get somebody really super close and expect to get a great key off it.
You can actually, so depending on what you're doing, using the key. So if you're using on their end, if you're keying something that's coming through Zoom, you've got all kinds of problems because you don't have enough there to work with. If you're getting an HDMI input, you can actually, one of the ways that you can improve that green screen is to not push the green all the way to 100% transparent. So what happens is the green screen might have a little bit of a vignette on the outside. What you want to do is desaturate that, so there's a despill, in the advanced keyer inside of the ATEM, there's kind of it'll just remove the green. It'll make it look gray. And then you start pushing that transparency until you see the background. But it doesn't have to be that you see the background perfectly. Now it does if you have the sun or if you have something really bright behind you. But if you have just a logo, it actually sometimes can kind of look nice because it's got a little bit of a vignette to it for them. But by not pushing it all the way, you retain tons of hair detail. You can get it to a point where people really can't tell. I did it. If you go back way back into the older office hours, I was doing that kind of key. Now, one of the things that I did is I keyed, what I was doing is keying in 4K and then going down to 2K, because I had a larger switcher. But so you get a little less, to Mitchell's point, you will get a little less detail, just going straight through. The biggest problem with keying turns out to be black levels. So what really, when your black and white levels don't match what's behind you, it's really problematic. And you see it all the time, like in broadcast. They just don't get the person in the foreground usually doesn't have black, their black levels are lifted just a little bit. It's like 2, 3, 4%. It's a minor thing, but it immediately has them look like a weird poster in front of the background. And so matching your black levels is probably one of the most important pieces of that. And then remember that generally when you're doing this, you're doing it on another ME. I mean, that's kind of an obvious thing, but you typically try to key it on a separate ME so that you can cut that in and cut it out with other things if needed. Next question.
From some guy named Mickey Macacor in Manila, Philippines, says, will there be an Office Hours 2.0 template for second hours that require feeds to be placed large in the screen, such as today, or during ruthless reviews or teardowns?
Yeah, these are just the SuperSources. I expect to go full screen a lot. So like we'll have SuperSources, and if someone's showing something or someone's there, it just goes full screen. So it doesn't have to be, it's not going to always be in some kind of graphic. It's just that these are the things when we put it into a graphic, this is what we would do. Next question.
From Matt Cool in Montreal, Quebec. Will you still have the audio meters, or do you even need them, as you'll have ISO audio?
We won't actually have ISO audio. So the way that Zoom ISO works currently is that we have shared audio. So we still, but our good, our good technique here is key. So we'll still have shared audio, but we will. So we'll still want to. We'll still have the meters. The meters will be there. What's different is that the panelists starting next week have their own view. What you see as a viewer is going to be all, it's going to be all the finished view. Now we may let you jump into it for a little while in the, to watch or whatever. But the main thing is that in the main view, we won't ever see the clock. Like the clock will never be. So you'll never see that in the grid anymore. That'll kind of disappear. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. Can't hear you.
Talking about templates, do you want to build something like this to give out to everybody and say, look, you got to put your face in the hole?
Yeah. Now I got to think through that, but yeah, we definitely want to do that, is have people think about putting the hard part is that we need to be able to somehow apply that, because not everyone can apply it over top of their video. So that's the challenge, is not everybody has the tools to do the template. But we can probably do something where in our system, we can show it back to someone or something like that makes that work. But, we're not, it's a different setup these are the kind of things we're gonna have to kind of figure out. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Just like we're looking at a meter that's being provided in meeting, we can look at a viewing aid that puts our head in a box.
But we have to figure out what that, right. We could pass that through. You're right. That's a good idea. So what Chris is saying, we can have another box that's getting fed that just plays out the live speaker view with the person.
Or we could train people in after hours how to, this is free. I set this up with OBS. It's not that hard. We could just teach.
Yeah, but I don't want everyone passing their video through OBS all the time. So
no. They don't have to pass it through, but they could, they could test their stuff and say, oh, okay, I'm sitting too low in the frame.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's quite possible. I really have a strong dislike for OBS on the Mac. So it's crashed so many times. I think I get a little PTSD every time I think about it. Next question.
All right, coming in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. In the examples being shown, would it be advisable to have the host have a lower third at least once in a while to identify who the host is for someone joining in late?
Yeah, I think we'll put that in. I'm trying to keep one of the things that I'm thinking through in that process is really trying to minimize the host and really maximize the panelists. So a lot of it is the host matters less in the graphic sense of things. They already have kind of the bully pulpit, so to speak, as the host. And so I'm trying to kind of keep it and we may keep on, what will happen is we'll constantly be changing this. But that's where I'm at right now. Next question.
From Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Says, what helpful panelist-only view graphics could aid those who have the view of it? In other words, timer, running out of time indicator, color, you're muted, audio level, next up commentator, time and segment, etc.
Go ahead, Stuart.
All of those plus tally.
Yeah, some kind of version of tally would be good. Now we're probably going to put a return signal back into the Zoom so that you can just see it. There'll be one of the windows that just has the graphics, so it's kind of our tally for the moment. I have got some other ideas. There's some limitations to what we can do in Zoom. In the end, what I want is some kind of heads-up display that can go up on the panelist side that has tons of other information, but it's going to take a little time to figure that out. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, says, we've talked about SuperSources, Isadora, and Atmos, but I'm concerned about maintaining the community cohesion or connection and unity we've built here as we move toward Office Hours 2.0. How can we maintain that even as we up our game?
Well, I think that it's one of the reasons we didn't do it at the beginning. So I think that we had to get to a certain point in what we were doing to, it's one of the reasons we didn't just start throwing tons of graphics and turning it into a show and doing all the other bits and pieces. But I think that there is a real opportunity for us to build a show that a lot of people, we get what we're doing here inside of Zoom, going to YouTube, but a lot of other people don't get that. And I think that while After Hours gives us a time to kind of hang out and do our thing, I think Office Hours is a real opportunity to build up, having more people just see it as a show that they're doing there. As that show gets larger, the opportunity for us is that, we, with more market leverage, we can have better second hour guests, and we can have, we can get more people sending stuff for us to test, and us, getting access to different parts of the industry and so on and so forth. So, growing that is I believe it's a necessary process, for us to kind of, but we had to get to a point, but you always have to be kind of growing, or you're growing or dying, so we have to keep moving forward. And I think that I think there's been an adjustment as we move to the panel view, but I think that while it's been a little bit of a different way of doing it, I don't know if any of us would want to go back. Every time I say, oh, you're going to have to raise your hands, it always feels weird now, like it's something, that is a little odd. Go ahead, Mitchell.
I like what's happening, and I think that it's evolving, and as long as it's organically evolving, it makes sense. And Alex, you've got the 10,000 foot high view of this thing, where it goes. I know it's fun to do all the graphics and stuff, and forgive me for even accusing you of this, but we don't want any of that technology to get in the way of the organic interaction, family kind of stuff that's happening here.
And we're going to keep on taking our temperature, like doing it and going, okay, how did that work? And this didn't work, or that doesn't work. And there's been lots of little things in the back end. We put the panelist view up, and then we realized people have to be able to take their hand down. They have to be able to take it down and put it back up again. They have to, there's a bunch of things that, and the only way for us to figure it out is to do it. We're doing a kind of show that no one's ever done before. Like, we really are out in this, we're out in the woods with a machete, like cutting the line. There's no pavement. There's no rocks. There's not even a deer path. It's just, we're just making it up. So I think that there's, the only way to figure it out, and the only way to see the other side of that is to do it. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that sometimes you have to work really hard to make it look easy.
Yeah.
You have to work really hard to make it look easy. And I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is really building up an opportunity for us to figure it out. But as we figure it out, there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of people to contribute. So, what we're trying to do is think about how do we run this with the same number of people that we run it with now, but also if 10 or 15 people wanted to help with a show, how do we incorporate them, into that process? And how do we make it possible for them, people to be pushing up the graphics like Carl does, or, like all these screen graphics and everything else could be managed in comms and everything else. Now, what that does is it makes our show better, but it also lets us, it's the ultimate training ground, because I see it as eventually we would have Office Hours 2.0 running, and there's X number of people watching that. But then we also have the behind the scenes of Office Hours running, and they're listening to comms like we do with Mad in the Kitchen, like we do with the Apple keynote. But there's just a bunch of people in there hanging out, watching Office Hours, but talking amongst themselves and doing stuff like that. And then, so I think that there's a couple different ways, and then there's people actually working on it and learning from it. And the big thing is that as we learn how to do it, it means that we're all learning how to do it. The goal is not that Office Hours 2.0 is the only version of that show. It's that we're cutting ground for a new kind of show, and then a whole bunch of people are learning how to produce that show. And then what we'll do is hopefully make those, make the hardware and eventually the cloud resources available to do the show. On there. Yeah. So, but that's going to be something we'll have some fun with. Next question.
This one comes in from Tuomo Kuloma in Finland. Does Office Hours have any design guidelines to work off when designing layouts and templates like typography, color palette, shapes, do's and don'ts, etc.?
We're still working on some of that. So a lot of that's going to still be experimentation. I can tell you it'll be lots of muted colors and cooler colors. That tends to be where I go, at least at first. Go ahead, Stuart.
I have to wonder if Tuomo is actually volunteering with the way that question is phrased.
Well, we can talk about that more, Tuomo. So so if you're interested in letting us know, we are planning to test your software. So as part of what we're doing for the graphics. So let's talk more. Next question.
Coming in from Craig McFarlane in Boston, said, I'd consider putting the host or question reader smaller, and to the left of the current question so the panelists have more horizontal space. If the host is also answering, do they get 2 spots?
Yeah, the host wouldn't answer because it'll be important that the host doesn't raise their hand so they don't get into the system, or they would get 2 spots, to your point. The big thing is that you have to remember that some people, and this is something we're kind of weighing, is that people are going to be watching on their phone. So the text can only be so small before it becomes unreadable. So you have to. It's a tricky business to design for 4K, but make sure that it's still readable by 640 by 360. So that's where some of the sizes are coming from right now. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, says, I love listening to the banter before the show on Zoom every morning as I eat breakfast and take my walk. It makes me feel more like I'm part of the community and less of a pure viewer. Will that go away, or will there still be comms or behind-the-scenes channel?
Eventually, there'll be a behind-the-scenes channel. At the beginning, it may not be that way because I'm going to try to manage one show at a time. But I think that we will eventually, again, my goal is that a lot of that banter happens. So my goal is that After Hours runs 24/7 and that there's a room, there's basically, a breakout room that is the panelist view. So the panelists just come in and hang out in After Hours whenever they're coming in. And then about, when we go, okay, it's time for mic checks, and they all go into the room that they're going to be in to do that. So there's actually no like raising your hand to go back to producer or whatever. They're just in after hours is just opened. And then they're pushing into that. And then we may be able to just push the show into After Hours as well. So that it may keep the Zoom experience, going all the time. I think we figured out that After Hours lasts 48 hours or something like that. And so one of the things we want to do is we'll just find a time each day that it gets refreshed. So there'll be a day, it'll probably be sometime like noon Pacific Standard Time or something is when we turn one off and turn the next one on. And then it's just running 24/7. And then, but during office hours, they're watching the show. So that's kind of the, my thought process there right now. Next question.
We may have just answered this next question, but also from Douglas Carmichael. When I get up in the morning and go to the park to take my walk, I immediately turn on After Hours on my car stereo so I can listen to what people are talking about and say good morning to my friends. Will that go away with 2.0? I'm already crying.
No, it will not. So again, it'll all be part of the same thing. In fact, After Hours will be more stable in the sense that it doesn't really stop and start. So it'll all be. This will make it. I think that there's more community opportunity than less in what we're doing. It's just that office hours kind of will be something that everyone kind of. Again, I think that what will happen is that we'll have all the panelists kind of come in, hang out with everybody for a little while in After Hours, and then just go into the breakout room. To jump into that. So that's the plan there. Next question.
From Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what considerations might there be for the SuperSource layout to accommodate the current question being asked on the screen? In other words, designated space or dynamic transition, transparent versus fixed backgrounds, etc.
Yeah, so I think that's. That slide in is going to be a graphic, so we're going to leave that wide open and then comp it in over top. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, it seems that the shelf life of the question is as long as it's being asked. It doesn't necessarily have to be there the whole time to the whole answers.
It may, the nice thing about it is it does lay a thing. So when you're scanning through it, you can see that. And again, I think that we're going to get to a point where if someone's talking, we don't have to stay in the SuperSource the whole time either. Go to the SuperSource and then tap in, I want to go full screen to the person talking, or I want to go to the full screen. And a lot of what we're figuring out there is how much can we actually do. So for instance, because we're trying to figure out how to give the operator who's editing a lot of power, but also keep it simple. And so one of the things that we're thinking about is things like just they might only have to tap full screen or they may only have to tap generally full screen or SuperSource because it knows who's talking. It knows who's making noise, and it also may know who. Now we might have to get more specific about people closing their mics to make sure, because that's one of the things that helps it. It's just that there's a person with an open mic, and when you go to full screen, it just automatically does what it needs to do. And there's a lot of those things that we can get into. Now, you make things too automatic. I think the mistake that most social networks and most people make is like, let's have the computer do everything because that's scalable. It's just the computer is rarely as good as a human making some creative decisions, but you want to hand that human the data that they need to make those decisions and the tools that they need to easily do it. So how do you get it down to where an average person can do this, but it can be very complex and designed and so on and so forth? And that's what we're working on. And I fully expect it to be very messy next week. I just want to manage everybody's expectation. It's going to be messy. Things aren't going to work, and we're going to decide a whole bunch of things. The only way for us to figure this out is to try to do it, and so I am very purposefully, next week will be messy. The week after that will be pretty good. And the goal will be to get to a point where we're like, hey, and it's a risky thing for us to do, and I'm going to depend on the panelists to keep playing, while we do it, because it'll be, messy for, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks as we kind of keep on making adjustments and, we figure this out. But by the end of the year, I think we end up with something that looks like a broadcast show. My goal is that by the end of the year, it looks like a broadcast show. It runs in 4K. It runs in HDR. It runs in at least 5.1. So those are the things and it just runs, and it's, and we're averaging, 10 people working on it on any given day, and so that's the goal, is to kind of build that up. And I think that if we do that, it just gives us an opportunity. I mean, we have the opportunity to be the biggest name in town. Like when it comes to our industry, where this is the place you want to launch your product. This is the place you want to, send your CEO. This is the place that you want to be part of that conversation. And so instead of me reaching out to people and asking them to be on the show, we have press people constantly talking to us about how do I get scheduled into office hours, and we'll be like, well, we got a slot for you 6 weeks from now, that kind of thing. And for us, I think that it gives us a real, we just get to learn faster. Like that's my real goal here, is that when we have the best of everybody coming to us to be on the show, and we get to grill them, it's just going to be a great way for us to just absorb lots of information very fast. So, because, we get to have those conversations. Next question.
From a youngster named Mickey Macacor in the middle of the Philippines says, where's the Office Hours 2.0 merch?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, I want everybody watching to just close your eyes and imagine the classic Che Guevara t-shirt, but picture instead Mickey. We want that. We want that.
That's funny. There will be merch.
Through shirts and hoodies.
Yeah. Well, I actually, there's going to be the logo there's a 3D logo that Chris Fritchie has been working on, and he's got, and we're going to actually make a USDZ model so that you can have it, and so that you can get it. But and we're going to play with that a little bit, but I'm very tempted to actually have it made, like into it. So there's like a little desk thing that you could get, but it'll be like limited edition. Like we're going to do it like once. So like everybody put your orders in, because we'll give everybody a month to put their order in, but it's going to be once, and then I think there'll be shirts and all kinds of other stuff. So
it needs to be hollow inside, so in the future we can install the holographic projector out of it.
We might make a second one for that. All right. Next question.
From guess it's Denise Champion Walker in Southland-on-the-Sea. Lovely place in the UK. Says, how do we volunteer to help out behind the scenes in office hours?
There's actually a form on officehours.global to say if you want to help. So go ahead and fill that out. There's a lot of people who have filled it out, and I haven't been very attentive just because I've been trying to work through how to manage the buckets. I think, but we are going to be leaning on everyone. And again, especially for the next 2 or 3 months, it's going to be really open to people who are willing to step up and do that. There's going to be opportunities for all kinds of things, things that are research, like if you see the mess that happens every time I have to create some videos for you guys to like we're going through the SuperSources or sweepers, we need a team that just goes out and finds those videos, compiles them, puts them together for the show. But the show should be 3 or 4 weeks away, like it's not, so we need teams that do that. Think about the graphics, look ahead. Like we'll need a team that's looking ahead, doing like what Carl was doing, but looking ahead in the questions, building keynote documents, putting, and publishing them so that, someone knows. And then there's going to be comms. Tucker's already promised to let us, he'll set up the comms for us. And so the cool thing is that the opportunity is a global production every day. So, and the best way to get good at something is to do it when you can, when it doesn't, no one's committing to it all the time, but it's also a great way to network and know people, because the best way to know other people is to do well and be in a project with them. It's much better than just meeting them or handing out their card or having beer. It's like being in the trenches is the way to do it. Next question.
This one comes in from Ted Claudio in Quezon City in the Philippines. Says, will the zoom on the lower right disappear in Office Hours 2.0? Maybe he's talking about the YouTube recording.
Yep. All gone. Yeah. And there's a couple things that'll happen there. One is that first we're going to get it working on YouTube, and then we're going to publish it everywhere. So it'll be, this format will go, eventually we'll have our own app. I'm working on that. And then, but so that we can play it out at higher resolutions and quality than what we can do on any of the platforms. But we will, as a test, so that we just get a sense of how this all works, we're going to publish it to, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all these other, Twitch and all those other things, just to kind of push it out there and see what happens, so that'll be kind of our research project. But first we're just going to get it working on YouTube. so it's going to be interesting. But yeah, that logo will go away because it's not going through Zoom anymore. Next question.
Kind of a related question from Ted Claudio in Quezon City. Says, will you be entertaining questions from the YouTube viewers in Office Hours 2.0?
No. Like we have a tool for that. So people who are watching YouTube should sign up in Office Hours and be part of that. But yeah, we're not going to, as we move forward, we'll probably, because right now Zoom creates that event, which, by the way, if you're wondering about, Zoom creates a new stream key every single day when I do this. Like I can't get to the bottom because you have to delete each one of them by hand. So I haven't gotten to the bottom yet. There's like hundreds of them in there. I sit there every once in a while when I'm in YouTube, and I'm like, so when I'm sitting in a meeting, sometimes if you just see me sitting there going like that, I'm literally just slowly deleting all the stream keys that Zoom has created inside of my YouTube account. Just one of the things you do while you're hanging out waiting for someone to finish talking. So what will happen though is we'll be able to design those. So we'll be able to schedule all of our YouTube events, every day. And one of the things we're gonna do is just turn off the chat. Like, we'll just turn all that stuff off. It's just there for you to watch it. I don't need the comments. Next question.
Kind of relates to that. It says from Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany, says, does the new Office Hours 2.0 format then make the Mukana chat obsolete?
No, that'll actually be more important, because the Mukana chat is the, and again, one of the things that we can do as we move to 4K, as we make it pretty, you're not going to want to necessarily watch it on your phone or on your laptop or whatever. You're going to want to watch it on your TV. So, you'll be able to go to YouTube, live, or YouTube TV or whatever, and watch it on a big TV. But what if you just want to ask questions in chat while you're watching it on a big TV? How do you do that? Oh, right. We have a mobile version. I wonder why we made that. So the mobile version has always been that. It is there for you to watch what we're doing on TV. And be able to chat and ask questions while you're watching. So that's what that design is. And eventually, what is a web page will become an app, and then it'll be a lot more stable. Next question.
Coming in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia, it says, will the SuperSource migrate to the back end of office hours supported Belfast method, Todd Reynolds, conversations with Tony Mobley, etc.?
The goal is once we figure it out, we figure out how to make it more available to anybody who wants to use it. And the goal is that we have, again, we may be able to leverage all of these things, together. The Mobley process, the Belfast method, all those things can be tied into it. And if we choose to use this as one of those things, that works. And all the things we're figuring out, we're going to show all of you. Basically, this is not an open source project, but an open and, open booked project where we want to teach everybody how to do it. There's nothing we're trying to hang on to, like in that sense. We want to let people, we're going to keep publishing what we're doing. We're going to keep having conversations with you. So you can take any of it that you want. If people want to do exactly the same thing that we're doing, we're only using it for office hours, X number of hours a day currently. So if people wanted to use it for another show, we would work on that with you. There's no reason why we couldn't do you could do an office hours about something else. And if you're a well-known person within, I probably won't be like someone could join and just do it. But if you're a panelist or you're someone who's doing something, that you're well-known in the community and you want to do a show, and that's what's happened. I mean, that's one of the advantages of being on the panel is like Todd Reynolds and Accidental Theater and Tony and Leo and Marty. All these folks are getting support because we got to know them. And how did we get to know them? Because they were on the panel. So I think that you'll have a hard time getting support for those kinds of things if you're not participating in after hours and office hours and Discord and so on and so forth. It's not that we won't let you take a shot at it if you've been here for a little while, but I don't think you'll get people to help you. And so that's just because they just don't know you. So I think that, that's going to be something that is it will take more people to run. But I'm wide open to having that happen. Next question.
Okay, we're running a bit over, but we're going to keep going.
We'll cruise through these. On the second hour, we started a little late, so I'm just going to run just a couple more minutes.
Okay. From Douglas Carmichael says, if you're running Mix Effect Pro on an iPad as part of the Office Hours 2.0 production setup, would you be concerned about a mobile device overheating in 24/7 operation? Wouldn't an M1 Mac be more reliable?
We may move to an M1 Mac just so that it's easier for us to screen share and run it, to turn it on and off. Right now, the Mac Mini or the iPad, it's mostly just a function of budget. I've dumped a lot of money into the system and I'm trying to stop hemorrhaging until we get it started. And then I'll make some budget. We'll figure out how to do more. But the iPad was available. So that's why and I have to admit, I stopped buying Mac Minis because I'm still not sure whether Apple will release a faster Mac Mini. So I don't want to buy any more until I see what comes in the next couple months. Next question.
Coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia, says, would the ATEM Mini Extreme still be the signal chain for being the panelist since Office Hours 2 is going to 4K HDR?
It's already not an Extreme. So the Office Hours 2.0 runs on a constellation, a Blackmagic ATEM constellation. So it's already it's actually got a 40x40 router, the Constellation, MV16. So those are all the things that are using it right now. So we've already moved past that moment. Next question.
From Sith Lord Snark, sometimes known as Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia, says SuperSource on holograms, part of the main hologram or a floating hologram orbiting the main subject? Is that a question?
Eventually we'll have we need AR to get a little further along, and then we'll just do holograms, and you'll be able to you'll be able to have breakfast like Douglas, like you'll be able to have breakfast, and you'll have a little thing. You just put your glasses on, and you'll be sitting there eating, and we'll just all be just floating in front of you, like just talking amongst each other. I think that and if you think that I'm kidding, I am not. I am not kidding. Eventually we will do, as AR comes out, we're going to find ways to leverage it. Go ahead, Stuart. Were you going to say something, Stuart?
If you could map faces to tiles and then AR those tiles in front of you.
Yeah, that's the plan.
I'm just wondering, should the SuperSources be facing the subject who's speaking, or should they facing the audience as they orbit around? And free-floating holograms are easy. The problem is the radiation.
Next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, it says, if we're using the same infrastructure for multiple shows, how are we going to manage loading different graphics or layouts into the system per show?
That's what we're going to figure out. but it shouldn't be hard. I mean, those kinds of things can be templatized. You just literally, I mean, we're going to get to a point where we can flip the show. I mean, that's just and how we do it is still there, but there's we should be able to hit a button and just say, we're going to this show, and it will flip the project inside of Isadora, flip all the things so that it's ready for the next piece. But the reality is that should not be. That's the least of my worries. Go ahead, Chris.
The real question is, when you reboot the truck, which template loads automatically?
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Okay, the last question coming in once again from Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned it's harder to get support if you haven't participated. I've done 2 to 3 Belfasts and participated in after hours, but have not been on the panelist yet. As a panelist yet.
No.
I don't have a lighting chain that would support or pass standards. Would that be an issue?
I'm saying if you want to run a show, I mean, you definitely, if you want to run a show, but we all know who you are, Douglas. Like you're a prominent figure here. So I don't think that there's any question there. So, no, I don't think the panelist is the only way to contribute to what we're doing at all. I think that there's going to be, more back end stuff. There's going to be more of a lot of things. I have officially been, so I have one more week of craziness, and then the next couple months I've been given a little bit more space from my employer. So a lot of things are going to happen pretty quickly. So I have much, my plate, I keep on saying we finally had to consciously say my plate will be emptied. so my plate, it's not completely emptied, but 75% emptied, to work on a couple things. And this is one of them. So that's happening next week, which I'm pretty excited about. So, and grateful that it was possible. It's an investment for the company to do that. So anyway, we'll have some fun with that. All right. I think we've made it to the end. Ran a little over. It's a good conversation. Sometimes I always wonder. I always go into some of these going, I don't know if we're going to talk for a whole hour, and even in the middle, I go, I don't know if we're going to talk for a whole hour, but we did. So anyway, great job. Great job by the producers. Great questions as always, and for the panelists, thank you so much for being part of that conversation. It's always good to see you every morning. Still, like what's funny is I don't know how many times we've done it. Someone always knows what it is, but I don't know what the number is. How many times we've actually done this show. What I find interesting is still that it's effortless for me to get up and do this. In fact, it's just annoying. Like a day like today when I have to go do something else, for production, I get aggravated. 575, Chad said. I get aggravated that I don't get to hang out with everybody. So anyway, I'm like, I gotta do this. So it's kind of an amazing thing. Anyway, but I blame all of you for that, making it a great conversation. And anyway, well, speaking of great conversations, tomorrow we'll talk about hosting. I'll talk about what I think about when I'm doing this thing that we do, and other hosts and other shows, and from other people that have been hosts, we'll talk about some of those things as well. But right now, we're going to jump into after hours. All right, see ya.